What's good, y'all? Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back on this lovely Wednesday. He has some sad news. Some very sad news. No race this weekend. Unfortunately, the race got rained out because of like extreme flooding. So to all my subscribers and viewers up in northern Italy at near Imola. Hope you guys are staying safe, staying very safe. Yeah, safety first as always. You guys know here, safety first. And hope you guys, staying strong. But yeah, no race. But with that, I think next week we're in Monaco. You guys know my thoughts. You guys know my thoughts about Monaco. I'm not really a big fan of the track. Yes, I know the historic, like the historic aspect of it, but still, it's at times it's real boring to watch. Like, it's very boring to watch at times, and so we're gonna see. We are gonna see. But anyway, how you guys doing? Hopefully you guys are doing very good, amazing, stupendous, and guess what? Outstanding on this lovely Wednesday. How F1 drivers are so fast in the wet. So with no wet race this weekend, we are gonna check out just what drivers kind of go through doing wet races. How they so fast. We have done like a top 10 wet weather drives, stuff like that. So if you guys have not check it out, I will have in the description down below. On that note, that's it. That is enough of my long ass intros. Let's get started with the video.
Driving in the wet is difficult in any race car, but in a Formula 1 car, it's a whole nother challenge. So what is exactly going on with the drivers and why is it so easy to make a mistake? For those of you who don't know, I've actually driven a few F1 cars in my career in a series for ex-Formula 1 cars called Boss
Shout out to my guy,
GP, and we had
61.
many races in the rain. And let me say, driving an F1 car in the wet is not easy. So let me explain exactly what these drivers are doing. So why is it so much harder to drive in the wet than in the dry? To start, there are just so many more factors you have to take into account when driving in the wet. The mental capacity you have to use up just to keep the thing in the right direction and on track is simply immense. This is because there's less grip than a dry track, but also because the conditions are constantly changing. On a dry track, you can get into a rhythm, as all that changes lap to lap is the fuel load, tyre degradation, and some track evolution, which at the absolute maximum adds up to half a second a lap. This means that you can really push the car into every entry, apex, and exit because you know how much grip the track is going to give you back, giving you that confidence that the car will stick. With experience, you don't really have to think about it that much. While in the wet, a braking point can change by tens of meters per lap. The amount of grip can change corner to corner, and wet patches and even puddles can appear. As a result,
I was just gonna mention that, like, there could be like different spots on the track which has like more, I guess, like wetness. Wetness has like more rain in one turn compared to like another turn. So like having to like constantly adjust the car, like adjusting how you turn on certain turns, stuff like that is like, especially when it's raining, like it's already hard enough to race in the rain. But like the track as well with the puddle, stuff like that, jeez, man. But it does make some good racing because it is pretty exciting, seeing what drivers can do. Some drivers are built for it, some drivers just ain't. But it does bring some pretty spectacular,
they know what will meet them at the next corner. So you have to be much more aware of your surroundings and how they will affect the car. This puts a lot more mental strain on the driver and causes a different fatigue than in the dry. This is why you generally see more mistakes towards the end of the race, like Alex Albon's in Singapore. He went into turn A a little too quickly. The track didn't give him as much grip as he was expecting, and he clumsily slid into the barrier. And it's really easy to do. To make things even more difficult, the track conditions can be completely different depending on which part of it you're on. One part of the track could be much drier, while other parts might still be wet. And the grip levels will be completely different, and may even require different tyre compounds. Remember the Canadian Grand Prix qualifying this year? Well, just ask George Russell. Even overtaking is much harder in wet conditions, especially when the track is transitioning from wet to dry. We saw this happen in Singapore a number of times, even to multiple world champions. Throughout a race, drivers will
Didn't it happen like in Russia years ago, I think?
line through the corners as they work out which line is fastest. This creates an optimal racing line which dries quicker than the other parts of the track, as intermediate and wet F1 tyres shoot gallons of water into the air every time they turn, clearing it from the track surface. However, when overtaking, the driver is going to have to deviate from that optimal racing line onto an overtaking line, which they may not have driven on all race. They won't know what the conditions are like on that racing line, and it will most likely not have as much grip as the optimal racing line, but they just don't know how little. This lack of grip and knowledge for the driver can cause them to brake too late, the tyres to lock up and send them straight on. To pull off an overtake in these conditions, the driver will need to have an incredible feel and adaptability on the brake pedal to get it slowed down for each corner. You're essentially trying to overtake a car that really has 20 or 30% more grip than you do. And of course, that's incredibly difficult. That's why Max made his passes by blocking the other drivers, meaning he just had to be first to the apex and could compensate for the lower grip levels. So how exactly do you drive in the wet to get the most from the car? Let's take a look at each phase of cornering to dissect what the best drivers are doing. And first is the braking phase. Braking is the strongest force that you can put through a car. So there is a lot of time that you can lose or win in the braking zone. And in wet conditions, it's even more important. Due to the low grip conditions, you aren't able to put as much load into the front tyres before they lock up. So of course you have to brake earlier than on a dry track. The driver will have to judge how much pressure they can apply to the brakes as they approach the corner. And like I mentioned before, this changes lap to lap in wet conditions. And during this braking phase, the drivers will be applying a technique called threshold braking and trail braking. Threshold braking is when the driver brakes to the maximum load that can go through each of the 4 tyres, therefore decelerating the car as quickly as possible. If they go too hard, the tyres will lock up. If they go too soft on the brakes, they won't be using the maximum capacity.
Do you know how like specific you have to be in doing that? Like, if you do it too early, you may mess up. If you do it too late, you may mess up. Like you gotta be specific regarding your braking during wets, man. That's freaking incredible. That's incredible, man. Like it's all because like you can, if you brake, if you brake wrong, you can slide off the track, you're hitting the wall. But like, you gotta be damn near pitch perfect, man. It's incredible.
Then, as the driver begins to turn into the corner, they'll be using some of that tyre's grip for cornering, which means they have to release the brakes ever so slightly so they can give up some grip for turning rather than braking. And it's this intricate balance that shows the difference between the good drivers and the great ones. Once the drivers come down to the apex, they will be off the brakes completely, so all of the tyre's grip can be used for turning rather than deceleration or acceleration. But of course, none of that matters if you're not on the right racing line. This is part of racing in the wet, in which you might be intentionally doing the opposite to what you might do.
Look how wide you go in the wet.
And here's why. During a dry race weekend, the cars will be driving on a conventional racing line, continuously laying rubber down onto the track on the same patch. And this is why we get track evolution. There's more and more rubber being put down onto the track. And rubber on rubber is very sticky. However, when it rains, that previously grippy rubber actually becomes very slippery. So you'll see drivers actively going away from the traditional racing line to find other parts of the track that will give them more grip. And that's why you might see cars braking in the middle of the track or taking tight exit angles to help them find other parts that are grippier. Now, Singapore is a little bit different. It's a street track and there isn't as much rubber down on the circuit. The circuit isn't actually being used as a racetrack before that weekend, so you don't get the opportunity to build rubber on rubber. That's compared to somewhere like Silverstone that would be very tricky on a wet race weekend, as there's lots of rubber down into the track. However, Max Verstappen did this to great effect in Singapore as he was off the line in turn 3 and passed multiple cars using this technique. He was able to get on the throttle earlier as he was able to straighten the car earlier to get into the final phase of the corner earlier as well. So
good to great drivers, man. Good to great drivers.
Which leads us nicely into throttle application. The final part of the corner in the wet can be the most important, especially when overtaking. With less grip available, it's much easier to cause wheel spin if the driver's too aggressive on the throttle, which will cause the car to oversteer, and they will likely have to get off the throttle to correct this, which in turn slows you down all the way down the following straight.
So my biggest concern, I've said this like a few times already, but like my biggest concern regarding like the wet races is is like all that like rain, like water just being like collected in the air. It's forming like a freaking like a kind of like a smoke screen, basically you could say. Like like especially like if you start like middle of the pack, like in the back, you're just kind of like driving like blind basically. And you can't see like anything in front of you because like all like the water, smoke screen, whatever is in the air. But it's crazy like how important braking is in wet races. Like if you can't brake properly, or like if you miss time it, GG. You know what I mean? It's a wrap. You know what I mean? Clean your hands, go off, hey, bye. See you later, mi amigo. But it's so pretty impressive. It's just extravagant. It's just like extravagant.
To combat this, they will need to have a more gentle application of the throttle and be nice and smooth with the pedal. This is why drivers like Jenson Button were so good in the wet. His smooth driving style and pedal inputs were made for these sorts of conditions. Drivers will feel the wheel spin start to kick in and mentally log it so they can adapt their approach to the next corner. You're always getting these little pieces of information about how much grip is out on the track, and it really is a corner by corner process. The driver has to be on their toes all the time.
That's
in the wet,
crazy.
It's all about
you gotta be locked the hell
in. Keep the car under control
turn
throughout the cornering phase and extracting the most grip you can from the conditions. So the drivers do have a lot on their plate. But what caused so many mistakes in Singapore? Many multiple world champions made pretty sizable mistakes, and one of the reasons is that the track never really dried. Normally how it works is that the puddles on the racing line quite quickly disappear and then the racing line dries up, and this just didn't happen in Singapore. But the next stage is that the dry line generally expands as more and more cars venture off the typical racing line, and this makes it easier to overtake as it's slightly drier offline, and from there more and more of the track eventually dries. But in Singapore, drivers were trying to overtake on the wet stuff, which is so difficult. It's no wonder that they made mistakes. Did you notice that Aston Martin were running their Hungary spec wing in Singapore? Well, we made a video about
that's incredible. That's really incredible. Excuse me. I need to sneeze. But very interesting, man. Hey, you learn something new every day. F1, I learn something new every day. How important wet weather drivers are, man. But on that note, hope you guys did enjoy the video. Don't forget to type the video sub as well as always. So you guys do keep in check when I go live, stuff like that. Like I said, the watch along was planned for this week, but we got to push it back to Michael. So should be live for that. Stay safe, stay amazing. Peace.